Let's be honest, there are people in this world who test your patience not by accident, but as a full-time job. They interrupt you mid-sentence, brush off your ideas, and treat your time like it's a clearance item on sale. And somehow, you're expected to smile, nod, and keep the peace, like you're the emotional support human in their drama series. But maybe you've reached the point where enough is enough, where you're done wondering if you're overreacting just because someone treated your boundaries like a suggestion box, where you're done playing polite while someone else plays disrespectful. If that's where you are, this video is for you. We're not here to fight fire with fire or to clap back like it's a Twitter war. We're here for calm, for clarity, for those stoic moves that don't raise your voice, but still shut down the nonsense. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how to protect your peace without sacrificing your self-respect. Even if the other person thinks boundaries are just optional. Let's dive in. 1. Embrace the silent stare. There's a quiet kind of power most people completely underestimate. It's not flashy, it doesn't raise its voice, it doesn't post a clapback on Instagram, it just stares. It's the silent stare. Now, I know on paper it sounds like a meme, like something your emotionally distant uncle might do at Thanksgiving, but in real life, it works. And it works because people who disrespect you usually want one thing: your energy, your frustration, your performance. They want to throw you off balance, make you defend yourself, or drag you into a conversation that leaves you wondering, wait, how did this become my fault again? But the moment you stop reacting and just stare, calmly, silently, fully present, that's when the whole scene shifts. Because now, they're on the stage. And trust me, most disrespectful people aren't built for that kind of spotlight. They're used to controlling the mood, not getting hit with the emotional equivalent of a "please explain" screen. I've done it. I was in a meeting once where a guy kept cutting me off like he had a personal vendetta against punctuation. I tried the polite thing, waiting for a pause, inserting a soft "if I may," all that, but he wasn't listening. So I stopped talking. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and stared at him. Not mean, not smug, just still. 5 seconds, that's it. But in silence, that's an eternity. He stumbled, looked around the room, then down at his notes, like they were going to save him from himself. He never interrupted me again. And from that day on, he actually treated me like I belonged there, which, to be clear, I always did. That's the magic of the silent stare. It's not aggressive, it's not confrontational, it's just calmly unsettling in the best possible way. Here's why. Most people have never been forced to sit in their own behavior. They've never had to look at it head on, especially when no one is rushing in to fill the silence or soften the blow. The stare becomes a mirror, and when someone says something rude, expecting an argument, and gets you blinking slowly like an emotionally bulletproof owl, it throws them. Even better, it recenters you, because let's be honest, most of us are trained to make things comfortable. We let the passive-aggressive comment slide. We nervously laugh when someone makes a joke that doesn't feel like a joke. We shrink to keep things moving. But here's the thing, your silence isn't passive, it's intentional. And in the right moment, it's louder than any comeback. It says, I'm not here to argue, I'm not here to explain, I'm just here, and I see exactly what you're doing. That kind of grounded presence is rare, and it makes people nervous in a way that yelling never could. Because the silent stare isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. I'll be real, I didn't always know how to do this. I used to explain everything, apologize for things I hadn't done, offer people 3 different angles on why my decisions were reasonable, just to avoid the awkwardness. Basically, I was the customer service rep of my own boundaries. But once I started using silence as a response, something shifted. I realized I didn't owe anyone a performance, that I could hold my space without needing to fill it with proof. Now, when someone crosses the line, I don't meet them there. I just look, calm, clear, centered, no drama, no script, just stillness. Let them figure out what to do next. So the next time someone comes at you with that energy, condescending tone, subtle disrespect, a joke that cuts just a little too deep, pause, look at them, and let the silence do what words can't. They won't know what hit them, and you'll realize something important. You never needed to yell to be heard. Because respect doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being unshakable. And nothing says, "I'm not here to be played with," quite like looking someone in the eye and blinking in fluent Stoic. 2. Embrace silence as your answer. Silence has a reputation problem. It's often mistaken for weakness, for retreat, for not knowing what to say or being too afraid to say it. But that's only because most people don't understand what silence really is. Silence, when chosen consciously, is power. It's presence. It's restraint. It's a kind of internal authority that doesn't need to perform. We live in a world that teaches us to fill every space, to respond quickly, to react, defend, correct, or retaliate, especially when someone disrespects us. And in the moment, it can feel almost irresponsible not to say something, like letting their words stand unchallenged is the same as admitting they're right. But that's the illusion. Because when you stay silent, not out of fear but out of clarity, you send a completely different message. You don't get to pull me into this. Silence is how you reclaim control in a conversation designed to throw you off balance. It's how you communicate without wasting breath on people who are more interested in provoking than understanding. Let's break this down. When someone insults you, questions your decisions, or tosses out a subtle jab, what they're often trying to do is open a door, not a real one, an emotional one. They want you to step into it, to defend yourself, to react. Why? Because that gives them leverage. It gives them your attention, your energy, and most importantly, your focus. But silence closes that door. When you say nothing, no rebuttal, no justification, not even a sigh, you create a kind of emotional vacuum. They're expecting a pattern. Provoke to react to control. But you break the rhythm. You don't give them anything to feed on. And that quiet, unresolved space, it makes them uncomfortable. Because now they have to sit with what they said, without your reaction to cushion it. I've experienced this firsthand. I remember working with someone who had a habit of making backhanded compliments. You know, the kind, "Wow, I didn't expect that from you," or "You're actually pretty good at this." It was always delivered with a smile, always wrapped in plausible deniability. For a while, I played along. I'd force a polite chuckle, make small talk, pretend I didn't notice. But every time, it chipped away at something, my patience, my peace, my sense of clarity. One day, I stopped responding. The next time he made a comment like that, I just looked at him. No frown, no laugh, just silence. The conversation didn't continue. He stood there waiting for my usual buffer, and when it didn't come, he faltered. He shifted in place, avoided eye contact, and eventually walked away. That silence broke the pattern, and more importantly, it reminded me that I didn't have to be part of the game anymore. That's the quiet power of choosing not to engage. But here's something deeper. Silence isn't just for the other person, it's for you. It's a tool for self-preservation, for protecting your energy, for not being pulled into conversations that drain you or arguments that go nowhere. Every time you choose silence, you're choosing your center over their chaos. Because not every comment deserves a response. Not every critic deserves your story. And not every moment of disrespect needs to be addressed directly. Silence allows you to stand in your dignity, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you've decided that your peace is more valuable than their opinion. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer. There are times when speaking up is necessary, but most of the time, especially when the goal is to provoke, silence is the more effective boundary. It says, You're not entitled to my energy. It says, I don't owe you my discomfort just to make you feel seen. It says, I choose clarity over chaos every time. And the beautiful part is, silence gets easier with practice. The first time, it feels like you're doing nothing. But over time, you start to notice how much more powerful you feel when you don't react, how much calmer your mind stays, how much space opens up when you stop trying to manage other people's discomfort. Because here's the truth most people won't tell you. Peace isn't found by winning every argument. It's found by realizing you don't have to show up to every argument in the first place. So the next time someone throws shade, makes a jab, or challenges your choices, pause. Not because you're unsure, but because you're clear. Look at them, let their words land, and then let them hang in the air and walk away with all your energy still intact. Because sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Third, stop explaining your choices. There comes a moment in life when you realize just how much time you've spent defending your own decisions, not because you wanted to, but because someone, somewhere, always had questions. Why did you take that job? Why didn't you go to that party? Why are you still single? Why did you leave? At a certain point, it feels like your entire life has turned into a never-ending episode of Explain Yourself, the Unsolicited podcast. And the thing is, most of the time, people aren't actually curious. They're not leaning in because they care. They're leaning in because they're confused, uncomfortable, or just bored with their own choices. And explaining yourself becomes a full-time job with no pay, no benefits, and a truly terrible HR department. But here's the shift. You don't have to do it. You don't owe anyone a TED Talk about your career change. You don't have to justify why you left a relationship, skipped the family reunion, or decided to go vegan for a week and then changed your mind. Your life is not a Netflix special up for public review. The moment you stop explaining your choices is the moment you start living them. That doesn't mean you become some cryptic mystery who never shares anything. It just means you start recognizing when someone is asking out of genuine care and when they're asking because your decision makes them uncomfortable. Because let's be honest, sometimes your courage shines a light on someone else's fear. You choosing a different path reminds them that they've stayed on the same one for years, and that kind of mirror can make people squint. So they start poking holes, not to hurt you, but to fix the image they see of themselves reflected back. And your instinct? Explain it all. Soften the edges. Talk them through your thought process, like you're on a second-round job interview. But here's the truth, their comfort isn't your assignment. I'll give you an example. When I left a respectable job to do something riskier but more fulfilling, people treated it like I'd just announced I was moving to the moon. The reactions were a mix of panic, confusion, and mild personal betrayal. Wait, you're leaving that? But benefits? At first, I gave them the whole narrative. Charts, timelines, emotional arcs. I was basically pitching my life like a startup, but no matter how much logic I offered, it never landed. Because the issue wasn't my plan, it was their fear of not having one. So eventually, I switched strategies. When someone asked, "But why would you leave something so stable?" I said, "Because I wanted to." That's it. No bullet points, no follow-up, just peace. And it worked. The silence after that was beautiful, mostly awkward, but still beautiful. Here's the deeper reason why this matters. The more you explain yourself, the more you shrink your life to fit someone else's understanding. And the truth is, not everyone's going to get it. Some people need things to be familiar in order to respect them. If your choice doesn't look like theirs, it feels threatening. But your job isn't to make your life palatable, it's to make it honest. When you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens. Your confidence stops depending on how others receive you. You stop giving people backstage passes to your inner world when they're just wandering around the lobby. That doesn't mean you don't share. But it means you stop handing out explanations to people who aren't really listening. Because let's be real, have you ever seen a truly confident person break into a 20-minute monologue about why they're doing what they're doing? Probably not. They say what they mean, and then they move on. That's what we're aiming for. So the next time someone asks why you did something, and you feel that pull to go into full-on narrator mode, pause, then say, because it felt right, and stop talking. Let the silence do the heavy lifting, because you're not a spokesperson for your life. You're the one living it, and you don't need a 5-point justification for simply being who you are. Fourth, keep your distance. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Not dramatically, not with a "you'll regret this" monologue, just quietly, like someone leaving a party they should have skipped in the first place. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone deserves full access to you. I know that sounds a little brutal, especially if you were raised on just be nice and forgive and forget, and they're family though. But there's a big difference between being kind and being available for emotional target practice. Distance isn't cruelty, it's clarity. Think of your life like a home. Some people belong in the kitchen, near the heart of things. Some are welcome in the living room, pleasant company, not too close. And then there are people who need to stay out on the sidewalk, behind a nice decorative gate, maybe with a polite wave from the window. But too often we give everyone a spare key and then act surprised when they raid the fridge, criticize the furniture, and ask why your walls aren't more cheerful. That's not loyalty. That's poor boundary management disguised as virtue. The truth is, some people will drain you every single time you let them close. They chip at your confidence, challenge every decision, or leave you second-guessing things you were perfectly fine with 5 minutes ago. And here's where we usually trip ourselves up. We tell ourselves it's not that bad, that they don't mean it, that maybe we're overthinking. Spoiler, if you feel like you have to emotionally pre-game every interaction with someone, you're not overthinking, you're under-boundaried. I had a friend like that once. Every conversation turned into a commentary track on my life choices, my work, my relationships, my taste in music. Somehow everything was slightly wrong. At first, I brushed it off. That's just how they are, I told myself. They're just opinionated. But over time, I noticed I felt heavier after hanging out. Like I'd just completed a full emotional workout, but without any of the gains. So I stopped trying to fix the vibe, and I started adjusting the distance. No dramatic unfollow, no grand declaration. I just stopped showing up as often, fewer texts, less availability. My social calendar suddenly felt like it had a breath of fresh air. And the best part? I didn't need to explain a thing. My nervous system already knew it was the right move. Here's what no one tells you. Some relationships expire quietly, not because of a fight, but because you outgrow the version of yourself that tolerated that kind of energy. And yeah, some people will call it selfish. They'll say, but they're your cousin, or you've known them forever. But look, just because someone's known you since middle school doesn't mean they're qualified to be in your adult life. Tenure isn't the same as trust. You're not being rude. You're being intentional, because your energy is not a group discount. It's a limited edition, invite-only experience. And people who keep showing up with criticism and passive aggression don't get season passes. Sometimes the most loving thing you can say is, I care about me too much to keep doing this. Distance is a boundary, not a punishment. And it gives you space to hear your own thoughts again, without someone else's judgment echoing in your head like a bad podcast. So here's the question. Who keeps pulling your energy into overdrive? Who leaves you feeling like you need a nap, a journal entry, and a therapist after one conversation? Now ask, do they really need this much access? You don't need a confrontation. You don't need a long goodbye. Just less of you, offered slowly, calmly, without guilt. because sometimes the best way to reset a boundary is with space and silence. And if they notice the distance, that's not your problem, that's your progress. 5. Hold your head high. When someone disrespects you, they're not just throwing shade, they're hoping you'll shrink a little. Lower your eyes. Apologize for breathing too confidently. Maybe even question if you were being too much for existing with backbone. But here's the move that changes everything. Don't flinch. Don't fold. Just hold your head high like you're the lead character, walking into the final scene and the soundtrack's already playing in your favor. Because here's what nobody tells you. Posture isn't just physical, it's emotional, it's psychological. When you stand tall, you're not just aligning your spine, you're aligning with your own worth. And people feel that. Confidence, the quiet kind, not the look at me kind, is unnerving to people who rely on subtle control. They're used to others shrinking when they raise an eyebrow. They're the type who thinks a well-timed sigh is a power move. So when you meet their sideways comment with a calm nod and steady gaze, it throws them. It messes with the script. They're waiting for you to squirm, to laugh nervously, to break eye contact like you're on a guilt trip you never agreed to take. But when you don't, when you just stand there like, yes, I said what I said. Next, they short-circuit a little. I've lived it. There was this one person who delivered backhanded compliments like it was their love language. Oh, wow, I didn't expect that from you, they'd say with a smile that felt like a slap in slow motion. For a while, I'd play along. Smile, laugh it off. Pretend I didn't notice the sting. Basically doing emotional gymnastics just to keep the peace. Then one day, I decided to try something new. Nothing, no reaction, no shrug, no forced laughter. I walked in, stood tall, and every time a comment came my way, I gave them a polite smile like I was answering fan mail. I even imagined a soundtrack playing in my head. Something epic, something with drums. And guess what? They backed off. It's like they suddenly realized I was no longer on their level, and not because I was acting superior, but because I stopped letting their words reach me. I wasn't in the arena anymore. I was in the director's chair. That's the thing. Holding your head high is not about arrogance. It's about self-assurance. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone. It's about remembering you're not less than them either. And yes, at first it feels awkward. If you're used to ducking out of tension or making yourself small to be easier to like. Walking into a room with your shoulders back feels like you're committing a federal offense. But you're not. You're just returning to your actual height, both physically and emotionally. You'll notice people respond differently. The ones who are used to treating you like an afterthought might squint, confused, like, wait, since when do they have this much confidence? The answer, since now. Holding your head high makes a statement, even when you're silent. It says, I'm not here for your games. I'm not here to perform. I'm here because I belong here, and I'm not asking for permission. And for the record, this doesn't require designer clothes or perfect hair or peak productivity. You don't need a makeover. You need to stop making yourself a guest in your own life. So the next time someone throws a subtle jab or treats you like an extra in your own story, resist the urge to explain, shrink, or smooth things over. Take a breath. Pull your shoulders back. Head up, eyes forward. You're not being difficult. You're just done being dismissible. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to raise your voice or swing a mic to demand respect. Sometimes all it takes is standing tall like your self-worth isn't up for discussion, which, by the way, it's not. And there it is. 5 ways to respond when someone just doesn't know how to treat you with basic respect. Some people will never fully understand your boundaries. They'll question them, test them, push past them like they're optional. But the truth is, you don't need their understanding to stand firm. You just need your own clarity. You've got tools now, not just to defend yourself, but to rise above the noise. Whether it's through silence, stillness, space, or simply walking with your head high, these aren't reactions, they're responses, conscious ones, rooted in strength, not ego. And yes, not everyone will like it when you stop playing small. Some people are allergic to confidence, that's okay. Let them sneeze, because the more you choose self-respect over approval, the lighter your life becomes. The drama quiets, the air clears, and you finally get to breathe on your own terms. Just know this: people who protect their peace usually press subscribe. That's it for now.